Jesus said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few." Our world needs more and more followers of Jesus who will be laborers in the harvest, among the harassed and helpless, the sheep without a shepherd. We long to see laborers like this next door to everywhere, so that no one anywhere has to go through life without hearing and experiencing the good news of Jesus. God uses ordinary men and women to be his laborers, to bring the message of his love. He sends ordinary people to cross oceans and to cross cultures so that people everywhere can hear and experience the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And he sends ordinary people across the street to carry the gospel in their own local community. In fact, usually the gospel spreads most effectively through natural relationships, neighbours, friends, workmates and family members. We see this clearly when we reflect on Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians. Paul reminds them how the gospel first came to Macedonia, and in doing so, he gives us wonderful insights into his strategy and approach. Insights which can still help us advance the gospel in the 21st century. Paul, Silas, and Timothy came to Macedonia as pioneers, carrying the gospel for the first time to Thessalonica. Their letter reveals their confidence in the power of their message and the love that brought them to live and serve among the Macedonians. They moved into a region that was foreign to them, a region where the gospel had not yet been planted. They came to people who had never experienced the faith, hope and love that the gospel brings. Through them, many heard the gospel for the first time. Paul's letter describes how he and his companions lived among the Thessalonians as they proclaimed the good news, and how local people responded to their message. Paul's pioneering team worked hard to help the new believers follow Christ in every area of life, teaching them the Word of God and showing them how to live it out. As they matured, these new Thessalonian believers became laborers in the harvest, local laborers. They were already connected to existing networks of relationships. So as these new believers learned to serve Jesus every day in the normal routines of life, they became carriers of the gospel into the whole area. Such local laborers were and still are today absolutely vital to the gospel penetrating a community, a city or a culture. Then, by the time Paul wrote his letter, we learn that local leaders had already been appointed among the Thessalonians, and Paul could write of those who are over you in the Lord and admonish you. Local leaders were themselves local people who fulfilled the vital contribution of caring for the spiritual health of the local community of labourers, enabling local labourers to keep on labouring. We know from the New Testament that such local leaders in the early church were not professional Christian workers. They cared for the spiritual health of local communities of believers while also managing their jobs and families. Local leaders naturally gained authentic respect by demonstrating godly character and service at home, in their community and within the local body of believers. Although Paul and his pioneering team left the leadership of the work in Thessalonica in the hands of local leaders, Paul stayed closely in touch. In chapter 3 of his letter, Paul writes about Timothy's visit to find out how they were doing and to encourage and strengthen them in their faith. Timothy is an example of what we might call a mobile alongside-er. These were dedicated people who paid a price to travel back into the cities where the gospel had been planted, bringing encouragement, help, and an ongoing sense of connection. Paul's team of mobile alongside-ers are familiar to us from the pages of the New Testament. Timothy, Titus, Tychicus, Aristarchus, and others. They travelled far and wide throughout the ancient world. They journeyed on foot and on boats. They carried news about the needs of believers in distant regions. They encouraged, taught, and connected. They delivered financial contributions and important letters. These 4 contributions continue to be essential for gospel movements today. Without pioneering teams, the gospel will never gain a foothold in unreached cultures. Without local labourers, the gospel will never penetrate into the fabric of a culture. Without local leaders, strong communities will never mature and flourish. And without mobile alongsiders, local communities will remain isolated and vulnerable. Today, God continues to combine these different contributions so that ordinary people like you and I can be effective gospel carriers wherever God has placed us. As Paul wrote, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe as you hold out the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor for nothing.